Right, good morning, everybody. Welcome to our Kirstenbosch Wednesday talk, brought to you by Room to Grow Sandy and Straight Nature. Lovely to see everybody online, and thank you for joining us. Just before we start, thanks to our sponsors. We'd like to thank Straight Nature. Straight Nature is the leading specialist natural history publisher in Southern Africa and is associated with the best-selling and most highly regarded field guides in the region. Straight Nature publishes full-color illustrated books across a variety of subjects, including birds, mammals, reptiles, trees and flowers, the marine environment, as well as geology, astronomy, general wildlife, and of course, the ever-popular children's nature. And then Room to Grow. My name is Brett. I'm the owner of Room to Grow, and we've been designing and creating outdoor living spaces in and around Cape Town since 2002. And we offer a complete suite of landscape design, constructed and associated exterior design elements from our design center. And you can find out more about us at roomtogrow.co.za or follow us on our socials. And then it's my pleasure today to introduce Steve Woodhall. Steve is an amateur butterfly enthusiast and photographer and has lived in South Africa for 45 years. His interest in butterflies began at the age of 5 and soon developed into a passion for watching, collecting, and photographing them. He is the past president of the Lepidopterist Society of South Africa and has authored several books, including the popular Field Guide to Butterflies of South Africa, and recently my first book of Southern African caterpillars. Both of these are available during the week of the talk at a discounted price from Straight Nature Online and the Kirstenbosch Bookshop. Now retired, Steve is a professional nature guide with a focus on butterflies. He also trains other nature guides on butterfly and moth recognition, as well as ecology. And Belinda will be putting up the details and links to his website where there's some more information around this. Then today, as usual, we ask for questions. So during the talk, you're welcome to pop those into the Q&A box. And at the end of the talk today, Steve will choose his favorite question, and the winner will receive a voucher to get from either the iOS store or the Android store. So Steve, very much looking forward to this. Over to you. And remember, get questions into the Q&A box during the talk, and Steve will get to them afterwards. Thanks so much. Thanks, Steve. Over to you.
Well, thank you, Brett. Yeah, it's good morning, everybody. Welcome to Room to Go Wednesday's butterfly presentation. Okay, so here we go. I'm here to talk to you about butterflies and moths and how they are ambassadors for biodiversity. And as Brett said, we've just brought out a new book, my first book of caterpillars. It covers 56 species of butterfly and moth, and it's aimed at children who are, in my experience, fascinated by creepy crawlies. And some species were chosen because they most often came up as questions on social media. What's this caterpillar? Or what's this worm? They're not worms, by the way. Or they're widespread, or of special interest, or are particularly weird shaped and interesting. And although it's based on species found in southern Africa, many, if not most of them, are found over most of the continent, especially East Africa, and some of them are found all over the world, like the painted lady you can see in the middle of the screen there. So I'm going to start off by showing you a few examples of what species are actually covered in the book. This is a tricolored tiger, Rhodiostraeus similis, and it's a familiar caterpillar. It's found in many places, eats a variety of plants. It's one of the ones that can make you itch, and it's one of the fastest moving caterpillars. These guys can really motor. They eat many different plants, some of them for bodybuilding, proteins and so on, some for energy, some for toxin gathering. And there's even some evidence that if they get attacked by parasitic wasps, they know which plants to eat to kill the wasp inside them. The adult moth is a beautiful pearly white with yellow hind wings and a red advert. That's why it's called the tricolored tiger. And these are warning colors that an advertisement to predators that it doesn't taste nice. And these moths can actually hear, and they can hear bat echolocation calls, and they can take evasive action to get away from the bats hunting them. And in addition to that, they can emit sound as well. And the latest evidence is that the sound can carry a warning to the bats, not to try and eat them. Then we have a butterfly, the eastern dotted border, Malophrys agathina. This is a butterfly that's a beautiful white one with an orange and yellow underside. And its caterpillars are gregarious, and they feed on plants in the family Santalaceae. Over much of its range, it uses mistletoe in the Loranthaceae, but in the fambos area, it uses Santalaceae, plants like the African sandalwood, Ossuus lanceolata, or the Cape sumac, Ossuus compressor. And these plants carry toxins that are carried over into the adult butterflies, and their bright colors are a warning to predators in the same way as a tiger moth. And there's the butterfly, beautiful orange butterfly feeding on a Vernonia flower. And these are found all over the eastern side of South Africa, and again, right up into Tanzania, Kenya, and further north. Then we have a particularly attractive moth caterpillar, the death's head hawk moth. And it's a well-known creature. It isn't rare in South Africa, but its nocturnal habits make it an unusual sight. The caterpillar is a classic hawk moth with, I'll show you now, a little, there we go, a little bobbly tail, and these diagonal stripes, which help to hide it. It makes it look like a curled up leaf. And it's got a very wide range of host plants, from Ocimum species, basil, it'll eat the basil in your garden, right through to trees like the tree fuchsia, Halleria lucida. The adult, there we go, has a mark on its thorax, on its back, that looks like a skull and crossbones, hence its name. And of course, that means it's got a long history of mystery and superstition, particularly in Europe. They can make an audible squeaking sound when handled, and they're often found inside beehives that they raid for honey. And this particular one came out of a beehive that had formed in my roof. And when I was told to get it out because it might make my roof collapse. And then the guy who came along, he knew about this moth, and he said, "We'll see if we can find one for you." And sure enough, there's one in the hive. They can actually puncture the cells and eat the honey inside the hive. And in fact, we found quite a few dead ones inside the hive that had been wrapped by the bees in propolis, which is amazing. This is a real specialist predator. Another butterfly caterpillar we cover in the book is the white-barred Caraxes. It's Caraxes brutus natalensis, which is a typical dragon-headed caterpillar. You see, it's got those four horns are typical of the Caraxes caterpillars. And yeah, it's all its relatives have got that. It's a butterfly. It's interesting. Its range has extended dramatically in recent years. It never used to be found outside the forested areas of KZN, the Eastern Cape, Knysna, Mpumalanga, Limpopo, and so on. And about 20 years ago, it started appearing in the Western Cape and Gauteng. We're not sure whether this was caused by its mahogany host plant being planted out of range as a street tree, or because it shifted host plants. The butterflies started laying their eggs on the invasive alien white syringa, Melia azararak, which is fascinating considering that's an alien plant, and this butterfly actually prefers it to the mahogany as a host plant. Here we go. There's the adult butterfly perching on top of a banana leaf. It's a real Natal butterfly. This one, it's very common around here. Found it in our garden, and it even wears a Sharks jersey. Now we move to a smaller butterfly, the common feathery blue, Irina salinus spicedula. Now, it's a member of the butterfly family Lycinidae, which are noted for the way their larvae or caterpillars are often attended by ants. And in this case, for Technomyrmex pallicles, a larva benefits from the presence of the ants, creating what they call a predator-free space. They frighten away parasitoid wasps and other things that might attack the caterpillar. And the fully grown caterpillar's skin can be seen to be covered in these little spots, which are all glands that emit chemicals that control the ant's behavior. These little caterpillars can actually attract caterpillars and change their behavior so the ants see it as one of their own and will chase away predators. The adult butterfly is one of our most beautiful small butterflies, about 35, 40 millimeters across. And they're found in savanna and grassland, in fact, anywhere figs grow, even in the desert. Now we come to a tailed moth. We're staying with tailed creatures here. There's a moth with long tails. This is its caterpillar. the African moon moth, Argema mimosae. It's got a large, warty green caterpillar, up to 90 millimeters long. It eats the leaves of Marula, Sclerocaria birrea, and its relatives like Tambuki, Spirosakis africana, and the corkwoods, Commiferous species. When fully grown, it spins a silken cocoon like a huge version of a silkworm. And here is a freshly emerged moth, male, actually sitting on the cocoon that it emerged from. It's got a wingspan of up to 130 millimeters, and the tails are up to 60 millimeters long. And they don't feed as adults. The females hatch out and they push out chemicals that attract the males. And the males use these big antennae to smell the females and zero in on them. So if you've got marulas in your garden or any of the other host plants and you live on the eastern side of Africa, you're liable to get these. They're beautiful creatures. Now we go to a caterpillar that's less in your face. It's a black-haired bush brown, Biciclus spitzer, and it's found in shady forests from Mossel Bay, along the south and eastern hinterland to Limpopo and further north. The caterpillars feed on grasses like the basket grass, Oplis venus hirtellus. The adults are shade lovers that fly low down on the forest floor, feeding on fallen fruit and the nectar of forest plants like this Strelitzia. This is Strelitzia nicolai, the wild banana, which grows here in KZN. And you can see here, this plant is actually being pollinated by beetles as well as a butterfly. The butterfly is sipping nectar from the plant here. Brown butterflies are quite common in Africa, and of course in Cape Town you get the Cape autumn widow, whose caterpillar looks very like the caterpillar of this one. So let's look at some facts about butterflies and moths. Well, first of all, there's about 6,500 species of butterflies and about 10 times as many moths in Africa, which compares to about 80 to 20,000 butterfly species in the world. And these are all insects, which are arthropods. They lack a bony skeleton like we have, and they're actually invertebrates. They don't have a vertebra, they don't have a backbone. There are an estimated 5.5 million insect species on Earth. And scientists have so far only identified and named about 1 million of these, so it leaves a vast number still unknown. That means over 80% of the Earth's insect biodiversity remains undiscovered. Most of them escape our notice because they're inconspicuous, good at hiding, live underground, and so on. So, butterflies, here's some swarming butterflies, they're easy to notice. This is a migrating, actually dispersing swarm of butterflies we're very familiar with in South Africa. They can resemble a blizzard when they're at full stretch. This is the pioneer caper white, Belenois aurota. It used to be called the brown-veined white until we realized that it was found in India and Southeast Asia as well, where they refer to it as a pioneer. And it's a little black and white butterfly with a yellow on the underside. This is a male. But it's not the only migrant we see in South Africa. The painted lady, Venessa cardui, is probably more familiar to people, certainly people living in the Cape, and it's one of the most incredible migrants in the world. There seems to be a major migration brewing right now. These social media posts are anything to go by. And I had one hatch out, and I've got some pupae sitting behind me here, and I'm waiting for another adult to hatch out. And I let them go in my garden. I've seen them flying around in the garden. That's in the middle of winter. They're incredibly tough little creatures, these are. Here's a female in our local nature reserve. She's laying eggs on one of the host plants, which is a thistle. And you can see, if you look on that leaf, it's covered in little tiny green pips. Those are the eggs. And they lay an enormous amount of eggs. Females can lay up to like 200 or 300 eggs, and they can travel a very long distance. Say, in Europe, they get all the way from left to Sahel, south of the Sahara, right up as far as Spitsbergen and Iceland, and all over Europe, including England. I still remember the first one I saw in England. And in South Africa, they're common as well, but we don't really know too much about these butterflies or how they get from South Africa to Central Africa. There's still research going on there. This is the life history, just a quick one here. There's the egg. You can see this one of those eggs taken off the thistle plant and vastly enlarged with a super macro lens, like a little green dome with ribs. The caterpillar, the babies, spin a web on the bottom of the leaf. You can see the silk there and a bit of poo. And that white stuff is the spur from the leaf that is bitten off and spun into the web. And this is a slightly bigger caterpillar. It's now on top of the leaf. When they're fully grown, they come out of their web and they eat the whole leaf. This is quite a beautiful caterpillar, this yellow stripe and the red spots. The chrysalis or pupa is like a little golden Christmas tree ball. And there's an interesting story here because the Greek word for pupa is chrysalis, and it comes from chrysos, which is the word gold in Greek. And this one was probably known to the ancient Greeks, must have been, because it appears in paintings, even in ancient Egypt as well. So you probably found that the Greeks coined the word chrysalis or chrysalides in plural for exactly this species. That's how far back our history goes of it. And at the top right, there's a freshly emerged adult female who emerged, and I let her go in my garden on my basil plants. Trying to find my pointer. There we go. Another very well-known butterfly is the citrus swallowtail, Papilio demodocus. And this is found virtually all over sub-Saharan Africa. In fact, wherever there are citrus trees, lemons and so on planted, the caterpillars eat those. But they also eat a wide range of natural rutaceae, of indigenous plants as well as citrus. And here's a quick little life history. You see the egg there at the bottom left, like a little green pearl on a fresh lemon leaf. There it is, vastly enlarged. The baby caterpillar looks for all the world like a tiny bird to. And why would a bird eat one of its own poops? And that's a very good means of protection. The fully grown caterpillar looks like a curled up leaf with some dead grey patches on it. And if you tickle one of these, it rears up, pushes out this V-shaped organ from behind its head, which smells of lemon or orange, and it whips its head around like a little snake. And that's the idea. It's got these eye spots that look a bit like snake's eyes. Then it hangs from a leaf or from a branch, from a little silken girdle here, and forms a chrysalis. A little bit different to a painted lady chrysalis. And it's, again, good camouflage because it looks like bark. Now we come to one of the moths, or as I prefer to call them, a not butterfly. It's easier to say something is not a butterfly than to say it definitely is a moth. There's a lot of rules, but there's also a lot of exceptions to the rule. This is an example that has its wings roofed over its back. And its antennae, the feelers, are filamentous. And that's a good sign that it isn't a butterfly. It's one of the moths, which outnumber butterflies 10 to 1. And it's one that inspires anger in many gardeners. It's the Amaryllis borer with this crini. And here's its prey, the ornamental Natal bush lily, Clivia miniata. And this is a beautiful display. It was in Pretoria, but it scores very low on biodiversity. There isn't anything else there apart from clivias and a few trees. And it's a magnet for little moths sniffing out food for their caterpillars because they detect host plants by scent. So if you plant a huge mass of clivias like this, you're sending out a big signal to all the British crini or Amaryllis borers in your area. Hey guys, it rubs on the table. And people like to think the moth is actually an invasive alien, but it's not. It's just global in its distribution. And it's in the family Amaryllidaceae, and these moths will eat any of that family, not just clivias. Clivia gardeners have to be vigilant. So watch out for these little egg masses on the leaves, and you see these ones have actually hatched, and the caterpillars have bored down into the leaf where they're eating the inside. As they grow, they come to the surface, and by the time they got to this stage, your clivia leaf is history. There's a fully grown caterpillar, and they're gregarious all the way through. When they finish eating, they burrow down into the nearby soil and form little brown pupae. Now, I hear you ask, why do you even have clivias in the wild if these moths will decimate them? And how do I stop them from doing it? Well, please don't use pesticides. That's not the thing to do. You'll kill everything else around your garden and maybe have an even worse outbreak because you'll kill all the predators as well. An easy way to protect your clivias is to plant crinums in pots nearby, because the moths prefer crinums, observed, prefer crinums to clivia. So, and you'll find the moths on your crinums. You can cut the leaves off and get rid of them, or you can just move the crinums elsewhere that the moths go through on the crinums. Wild clivias, like this forest bush lily, coalescens, grow at very low density in cool Afro-montane forests, and the chances of a female moth finding one of these are very low. And the plant may go for several years between attacks, during which it can flower and set seed successfully. So going back to the numbers, there are about 670, give or take 4 or 5, of butterflies and about 7,000 moths in South Africa. And using the same ratio of butterflies to insects from the rest of the world, that's about 260 species of insect for every butterfly species we have in South Africa. Butterfly, not moth. Or nearly 180,000 species of insects, most of which we have no idea are there because they're tiny or hard to see. But they're vital to our ecology, all of our ecology, all over the world, because they're the first level of the food chain above plants. They're the first animal level of the food chain. They're called the primary consumers. And have you heard of the insect apocalypse? When did you last have to clean your car windscreen after 200 kilometers of night driving? This is a scary piece from the Guardian newspaper on the 3rd of June, pretty recently. It's entitled "Half a Tree of Life, Ecologists' Horror as Nature Reserves Are Emptied of Insects." And this is David L. Wagner, who writes books on caterpillars in the US. He's published 4, and these aren't children's books. These are proper adult field guides. Butterflies and moths are an indicator of the overall health of insect biodiversity, and they're basically its ambassadors. They're easy to see, they're beautiful, people love them more than they love wasps and beetles and things like that. And in Costa Rica, which this work was done, it showed our moth numbers have crashed over 35 years. You can see at the top there, this is a moth trap using ultraviolet lights to attract them in 1984. And then 35 years later, in 2019, you can see the difference. It was on virtually the same date. And there's only, well, just about half a dozen big moths on there. On this one, most of the big moths are there. And as all the other creatures that eat them, reptiles, small mammals, and especially the birds we cherish, it goes down the food chain as well as up to it as well, because these pollinate plants, which are their food. So they take a hit as well. So it's affecting the entire food chain. Going back to the numbers, my partially rewilded suburban garden in Gillets and KZN, there's 123 species of butterfly at the latest count, which translates to 35,600 species of insects: wasps, beetles, flies, dragonflies, ants, mosquitoes, etc., etc., etc. And I use no pesticides, and I plant locally indigenous where I can. Yes, I do have some clivias, but they are locally indigenous. I don't rake away leaves because most insects, including a lot of the moths, pupate within the leaf litter layer. I've got a small functioning forest, which I don't clear at all. It's got an understory. And the actual fact is, it's part of an old forest that existed before my house was built. So I'm a custodian for my bit of wildlife. So this is me helping to protect just one small part of our country's biodiversity. So what can we do to help? Well, one thing is to get to know your local ecosystem and what makes it tick. One thing to do is to go to the iNaturalist site, and I think Belinda will put it in the chat. And there's a TED talk by Scott Lowry, Dr. Lowry, on the surprising power of your nature photos. He started iNaturalist years ago, and it's grown into a massive resource. And he tells a story far more eloquently than I could. With more than 250 million records of over 500,000 species around the globe, by nearly 3.8 million observers. And in South Africa, it's very active as well. Nearly 5.5 million records of 42,000 species from, coincidentally, 42,000 observers, of which I'm one. And the chances are some of you are watching this presentation as well. I'm sure a lot of the people here have used iNaturalist. This is an example of my little home patch. This is Chelmsfordville in KZN. And that line you can see there is where I go for a weekly transect walk through a PT Nature Reserve. And there's some examples of what I've photographed there. This is just, if you go into iNaturalist, you can pull up a report of any area in our naturalist, even as small as your garden. So you can see with some butterflies, it's a painted lady with its host plants, some other butterflies, a couple of mother of pearl, and even a bird, a flycatcher, appropriately. Or you can count butterflies using the butterflymonitoring.net link. This is called the EBMS, which stands for European Butterfly Monitoring Scheme. But it's not just Europe, it's already active, in fact, all over Africa and over bigger and bigger areas of Europe. It's active in South Africa, and it's actually going to be global before too long. Have a look and sign up. You can sign up in this country. I'm a local coordinator, so I get a message when somebody signs up. I've been doing what they call transect counts weekly in EPT for nearly 2 years. That's where you set out about a kilometre-long walk with sections for different habitats, and you just simply walk along and count the butterflies you're seeing. So this is the results of my counts from October 2023 to June 2025. And you can see here, there's 2 peaks. So the yellow curve is the number of species and subspecies that I counted. And you can see it peaked at 40 this year, 43 last year. And then the green one is a number of individuals. Now, these data can be analyzed in various ways. What I've done is to produce this curve here, which gives you the average count per month, and then a 12-month moving average of that. And you can see the double peak. Now, it's quite interesting because we always used to think there were 2 peaks of butterfly emergence in KZN, but there's not, there's only one. Springtime, in September and October, they're falling in numbers. And that's when the weather starts getting cloudy and cold. And then, of course, in December, when it starts to get warmer, they peak again. And you can see, this is a 12-month moving average of numbers here. And you can see that it has ticked upwards this year. And there's actually more around than there were last year. But this is just the start. In the UK, they got data like this going back to 1973. They used to collect the data on handwritten sheets and fax them to a place in London where they captured the data on a mainframe. And they've got the same data set running now. And this, by the way, is how they discovered the infamous insect apocalypse, because it's over the years, the numbers just get on falling and falling and falling. Or you can join the Lepidopterist Society of Africa, which has been going since 1983. The link's in the box. And you can support our conservation efforts and access our publications. So there we are. Thanks for watching. Do you have any questions?
Thank you, Steve. Thank you so much for that. That's amazing. I'll just kick off. I wanted to ask you, if people wanted to go and learn more about the butterflies and moths, is there one specific place, or is there somewhere you could direct them to as a starting point?
Well, the society's got plenty of web presences, and if you join the society, you get into a WhatsApp group where you can ask questions. There's a Facebook group you can join, and that then allows you to ask general questions of the membership. And also, I've started a website which is www.butterflygear.co.za, and I'm putting things on there about things like butterfly gardening, and I've started putting some butterfly videos on there with some quizzes that people can sign up for. So there is quite a lot of resource to learn more. And of course, for kids, there's the caterpillar book.
Great. Thank you. Okay, then let's get on to some questions here. Roger has asked, can butterflies and moths be compared to the canary in a coal mine? In other words, do they warn us of pollution disappearing or dying when the air is contaminated?
Well, it's not just the air, of course. It's pollution is a thing, definitely. But the other thing is habitat destruction, which is probably the biggest use of pesticides, particularly the new neonicotinoid pesticides, which are incredibly toxic to insect life, not just butterflies and moths. But they also are very, if you go and plow up a field where the butterfly is living, there's nothing for it to live on anymore. So so they are like a canary in a coal mine, and yes, definitely pollution does affect them. We know that, but it's not the only thing that affects them.
Thank you. Natalie has asked, hi, Steve. Do we know the minimum distance these migrating species can travel before they need to feed?
Oh, no, that's an interesting... They feed as they go. the migratory butterflies that are well known are the American monarch and the painted lady. And observing those in the field, they stop to nectar as they go along.
Lauren has asked here, how do we tell the sex of the species?
With some butterflies and moths, it's easy because they're different colors. If you look at, for instance, trying to think of an example, eastern dotted border, the females are much more orange than the males at the top. The males are plain white, and the females vary from yellow through to orange. You get some butterflies where the males and females are totally different, and moths as well. In fact, generally you find with emperor moths, the females are bigger and fatter. A lot of butterflies have got, in fact, insects, the females have got bigger abdomens because they have to carry eggs. So just look at the size of the abdomen. And also with butterflies, the antennae tell you a lot, the color or the shape of the antennae as well. So that's another way. If you get a book on butterflies, it'll show you where the sexes live.
So Lauren's follow-up was, do your books have all of these very interesting tidbits and information?
Absolutely. The books have got, obviously, as Strake would tell you, there's a limit to how much you can stick into 440 pages. So we did as much as we could, and we certainly got all examples of what they call sexual dimorphism, but there's also seasonal dimorphism where you get different seasonal forms, or polymorphism where you've got simply different shades of the same insect. Now the app has got all of those in it. That's one thing where the app is better than the book, because you can actually go for all the photographs we've got, not just that I've taken, of friends of mine as well. They're actually in there, so you get a pretty good chance of identifying something using the app.
Fantastic. Yvonne has asked you, I have read that butterflies are just, in brackets, colorful daytime moths. What is your take on this?
That's actually true. Butterflies actually are not, we used to think that they were more advanced forms of moth, but they're not. They're actually quite a primitive form of moth. In fact, the research that was done behind Herman Staudi's book, Southern African moths and their caterpillars, that showed a lot. There's a lot of interesting stuff in the introduction, and the ancestral butterflies probably split off from the Lepidoptera family tree around about 100 million years ago or thereabouts, and they were more closely related to the Microlepidoptera, the tiny little moths that look like dandruff flakes. That's where they come from. That's how long they've been around. So yeah, they became day flying. There's still a lot of disagreement between the experts of what actually triggered the day flying behavior. Was it because they started feeding on angiosperms, flowering plants with colored flowers? Or was it because they started developing poisons, which they could best advertise by having bright colors, which obviously works better in daylight than at night? But there's all sorts of, there are probably many reasons for the switch. But yeah, and you get, of course, day flying, what we call typical butterflies, a superfamily Papilioidea, and not the only day-flying Lepidoptera. In fact, there are probably more day-flying, what we call moths, than there are butterflies.
Wow, super interesting. Jane has asked, do our South African butterflies migrate overseas or locally? And if so, which ones and where do they go?
We've got actually three main migrant butterflies here. There's the Pioneer Cape of White, which mainly in South Africa migrates from the Kalahari to the east, but it does go north as well. We've got the Painted Lady, which goes from South Africa, who knows where. We just know they go north, and they're found in the Congo and places like that. Whether they link up with the northern population, we don't know for sure. There's research needed there, but they probably do in some way. There must be some gene flow. There's also there's a butterfly called the African migrant, which goes through what they call burst events. They suddenly become very common, and the caterpillars feed on peanut butter cassia, which is a very common alien plant. And certain times of the year when butterflies start emerging, you get thousands of them. These are the males are sort of pale green color, and the females are either pale green or yellow. And within moths, we get moth migrants as well. One of the hawk moths, the convolvulus hawk moth, we know it migrates because I've actually been running moth traps at night on top of mountains where, all of a sudden you get the trap gets completely blanked by moths, thousands and thousands, millions of large grey hawk moth buzzing around, and within them a whole load of rarer species as well. And anecdotally, they must be getting as far as Europe, because you get the same species mix in Europe as well.
Wow.
But there's more research needed.
There we go. Diane here says, hi, Steve. What is the average lifespan of a butterfly?
It varies again. It depends on the life history. If it's one of the ones that doesn't feed, and there are a lot of butterflies that don't feed, some of the more specialized ones that feed on rock lichen, for instance, and they, as an adult, will only good for a week, 2 weeks or so. But some of, like the painted lady and the African plain tiger and a few other ones that migrate, they can have a lifespan of, well, they can be up to 6 weeks or more. And then some butterflies, like the commodores, the gaudy commodore and the garden commodore, they overwinter as, and the mother of pearl, they overwinter as adults. So they emerge from the chrysalis in late summer, and they spend the winter lurking in your trees, or even come into your house, sit in your curtains. And they only really start being active again. You might see them first of all in April or May, and then they come out again into the what they call it, the bright light of spring. Then they start mating.
Well, okay. So varied. Barnabas has asked you, can the conservation of butterflies and moths serve as an effective umbrella strategy to protect broader invertebrate diversity?
Oh, that's a good question, Barnabas. I know Barnabas, actually. Yeah, that is a great question, because this talk is entitled Ambassadors of Biodiversity. And anything you do to protect butterflies and moths will automatically protect all the other insects as well. Like, for instance, not using pesticides, like protecting your environment and keeping the leaves where they are instead of sweeping them up, like planting locally indigenous plants so they have something to eat. You know, I think I mentioned not using pesticides already, but not planting monocultures. Have an environment that's got a great variety of locally indigenous plants. Mm. So all those things that you do, because remember, other things eat butterflies, including other insects. So if you have a diverse butterfly population, you'll also have a diverse population of wasps and flies. And of course, wasps and flies, I hate them. Wasps sting and flies spread disease. Only a few species of wasps will sting humans, and most flies don't feed on dung and things like that. They're nectar feeders. So if you see a fly in your garden, the chances are it's actually quite innocent, and it's an insect. Its survival is just as important to biodiversity as a butterfly.
Fair enough. Sorietta and Liam have asked you, I recently collected a joker butterfly in the Magaliesberg. How can I identify between the two joker species from each other?
That's a good question. Okay, what you do is, and I can't show it on the screen right now, you look at the upper side, and there's also, if you go onto my website, there's actually a link under the blog posts on getting to know the jokers, and it explains it in great detail how to tell the difference. But the easiest way to tell the difference is to see the upper side. If you look at the hind wing upper side, on the spotted joker, in the middle of the wing, there's a row of little black dots in the orange. And in the African joker, it's just a plain orange band. The undersides are a bit more difficult, but the blog post explains it.
Thank you. Lauren says, thanks for the update and for the answering about the sexes of the moths and butterflies. And then it's followed up with, is the white male of the eastern dotted border the same as the common dotted border, or is it a different species?
Now, what's happening there is common names are changing. We used to call it the common dotted border because it is the common dotted border in South Africa. But further north, of course, there are dozens of species of dotted borders. I mean, a friend of mine, Peter Morangash, did a monograph on them. And I think there's something like 100 species for Africa. And that one is mainly found in East Africa. So we call it the eastern dotted border. But it's the same butterflies. Myelophoris, the Latin name, the scientific name is Myelophoris agathina. And it's got more than one subspecies. So it's called agathina down here. And that's why we always say to people, if in doubt, look at the scientific name.
Yep. Good advice. Rachel has said, hello, Steve. Thanks for an interesting presentation. You mentioned a caterpillar that can eat a certain plant to kill a parasite that could be inside them. How does that work? Does the plant help to kill the parasite?
Plant contains chemicals that kill the parasite. This is very new. This is something I found out about only a couple of weeks ago, when I was actually listening to a talk on tiger moths, funny enough. The tiger moth caterpillars are what they call obligate polyphages. They need to eat a salad of plants. They can't get away with only eating one. So they need one plant to give them energy, one plant to build protein, another one to take in their own toxins to make them unpalatable to predators. But then we found, what we found, that the scientists doing this work found that they would eat certain plants that contain toxins that are toxic to insects, particularly wasp grubs. And there's another bit of work which I only just found out about now, I'm still trying to find the link, is that one of the most fascinating butterflies is the monarchs and the tigers and so on. What they do is, we used to think that they ate plants called milkweeds, Asclepiadaceae, and they contain cardinal-like toxins which are toxic to animals. And the wisdom was that the caterpillars ate the toxins, they metabolized it, the butterflies used those toxins to deter predators. And then a clever professor in Germany realized that these butterflies, even if the caterpillars ate edible milkweed plants, and things like stapelias are milkweeds, but they're edible. So the caterpillars were edible, but the butterflies eventually were toxic. And then that pointed to another behavior the butterflies have. They will seek out plants when injured, give out bitter alkaloids. And they actually take in the alkaloids, it's called pharmacophagy. They take in the alkaloids and create their own pheromones to attract females and their own bitter tasting deterrents, predator deterrents. And then some other people started thinking, well, why are the caterpillars eating those toxic plants if it doesn't go through to the butterfly? And then the latest research is showing they actually are, those cardinalides are also toxic to parasitoids. The parasitoid is something that behaves like a parasite in that it lays an egg inside an insect, and the egg hatches into a grub which eats the insect from the inside out, sorry, a bit like the movie Alien, and then bursts out. And you often see that with caterpillars. You see those little cocoons going around a dead caterpillar. Well, it might be, but I don't think they're 100% sure yet, that the reason why the monarchs and tigers eat poisonous milkweeds is because the toxins in the milkweed actually keep the predators away from them as well. The internal predators, which would be, if that's shown to be true by some there's a lot of clever scientific research done around the world. I'm sure we'll get to know the answers sooner or later. But that is another. So animals have known how to medicate themselves right back since insects.
Fascinating. Barnabas has said, is storing insects, butterflies, and moths in boxes good? And if yes, what are the best practices for long-term storage of dried insects in insect boxes to prevent deterioration?
Well, yeah, I mean, the best thing you can do is keep them dry and cool. And I mean, the best museums store them under dry nitrogen, and they put them in trays, and they're in boxes in the trays. So that's rather expensive and difficult to do, but that is how you do it. Is to keep oxygenate because they oxidize, and to keep things like museum beetles out and mold and things like that is to keep them dry and obviously out of sunlight because they fade. So yeah, keeping them in boxes is a pretty good strategy for long-term storage.
Thank you. Another question from Sariette and Liam is that can I identify between the 3 zebra blue species in Pretoria?
Well, that's a fun one. Okay, what you do there is, there was a paper that was written some years ago which actually shows the differences between the male and female genitalia. You have to catch a male. It doesn't really work that well with the females. You've got to prepare the females by dissecting them and then cutting their tail off, their abdomen off, boiling it in potassium hydroxide solution, and then looking at her genitalia under a microscope, which is not very good for the female butterfly. The males, again, if you catch one and get some spade-ended tweezers and extrude the male genitalia by squeezing his abdomen and the valves open. The valves are what you grasp the female with when they mate. And using a hand lens, you can see if there are spikes on the valves or little hairs or nothing at all. And that's how the 4 species differ from one another. And again, you need, if you want to do that, then it involves killing the butterfly. And in fact, I spoke about putting this in the field guide, and the feeling at Strake was that we shouldn't do that. It might encourage people to kill butterflies. But I think what I'll do is I'll dig out that paper and clean up the drawings to get on the site. But please, what is easier to do in actual fact is if you think you've got one of the other species, is to join LEPSOC and then put it on our naturalist, but the our naturalist won't help you with the microscopic stuff. But once you've done that, you've actually got an accession number for the specimen, and get it to a museum, get it to somebody who can do the DNA and do the microscopic examination properly. I used to catch the males and extrude the genitalia. I stopped doing it because number one, I found that 95% of the time or more, they all turned out to be Leptotes periathos, the commonest one, the common zebra blue. They were, all the time it turned out to be that. There was one instance up in Nezanin when I saw one and I caught it after taking a photograph. And when I did the genitalia, I realized it was Babalti. And then, so I took the photograph, and that's in the book. The mistake is that it's a very fresh specimen with slate gray markings on the underside. And everybody thinks that's a pointer from a Babalti. It's not. Like all these butterflies, they're dark gray and white on the underside when they're fresh. And as time goes on, it fades to pale gray. It's not a sign that it's a different species of butterfly.
Well, interesting. I hope that answers the question. Peter has asked you, the caterpillar of Acaria horta has almost eaten all the leaves of our Kigellaria africana tree. Does the butterfly migrate?
No, it'll hang around. It might migrate to another garden that's got Kigellaria nearby, but they don't migrate as such. They disperse. They'll form a pupa nearby and they'll hatch out. And in the time it's taken for the caterpillar to turn into a butterfly, then your trees put out new leaves and they'll go back and eat your tree again. I've got them in my garden, and every year the tree gets defoliated by the butterflies, and every year it grows new leaves again. But they spread. People grow Kigellaria in areas where it's not natural, and for instance, it's not endemic to my part of KZN. It's an inhabitant of cool Afro-montane forests. This is where you find the butterfly most of the time. But I planted 2 trees in my garden, and it turned up.
Here we go. Okay. Jane's got a follow-up. She was asking initially about which of our African species migrate overseas, and then she says, do we know where they stop over, or is it, and for how long, or is it just a constant, they're just constantly moving?
Well, with the pioneer caper white, we're pretty sure that they just keep on going until they find host plants or mate and lay eggs, or get eaten, or get hit by a car. They've been seen flying out to sea in the Mozambique Channel. They just keep on going. The painted ladies, we're not too sure what they do. In North Africa, during the autumn and winter of Europe, they're found in the Sahel, where they feed on thistles and mallows and things in huge numbers. And in fact, migratory birds, like the lesser white-throat that turned up here the other year, they follow them. They come in winter, they come down to North Africa, where the food is there waiting for them, painted ladies and other migratory butterflies. So the birds follow the biomass. And then in the northern hemisphere spring, they start going north. And the butterflies fly lots of different routes. They take the West African route up into the Maghreb, which is North African coast. They go along the Nile. They go in. They accumulate in Arabia, of all places. Arabia had good rains last year, and painted ladies exploded there. They even go right over the Sahara and the Mediterranean in one fell swoop. And they've used radar. They found them at 1,200 meters up. But they could actually using these new clever types of radar, they're able to, they were able to calibrate the radar on painted ladies, so they know that painted ladies were flying at 1,200 meters up at night.
Wow.
and then they go from, and they've also used a technique called stable isotope analysis, because if you know what plants the butterflies are eating, you can actually look at the isotope of hydrogen, the ratio of isotopes in their food. And then if you catch that butterfly in Europe 6 weeks later and you measure its isotopes, you've got a pretty good idea of where it came from. There's a huge amount of research being done on this.
Sure, that's fascinating. Yvonne has asked you, I see a lot of painted ladies here in the Western Cape. At least I always think they're painted ladies. Are there other species that I could be mistaking them for?
Not really in South Africa. I mean, some of the acreas are a similar color, sort of pinkish orange color, but that combination of rapid flight, rapid wing beats, and the sort of pinkish orange and black popicide, there's not many other butterflies in this country that you mistake them for. And in actual fact, there's if you join the EBMS, there's a painted lady study group in there. There's actually a special what you call a 15-minute single species count. So you start it up on your phone, and when you see your first painted lady, you touch the little icon and it counts. And then and if you see another one, you swipe it right, and it counts again. You keep doing that, and then later on, you can then, after 15 minutes, you can actually go into each one of those records and say what sort of condition was it in? Was it feeding? Was it mating? Was it behaving territorially? And that then goes into a massive database. They've been using this in Europe now to track painted ladies for quite a long time, but it's only just started in Africa. It's very new here, and that you can do. So I'm plead with you, if you see painted ladies, then start counting them. It doesn't matter where you are, because your phone will actually pick up the GPS coordinates, and all the information goes into the EBMS database, where people like Professor Constantin Stefanescu can see it. He's one of the lead researchers on these butterflies. He's based in Barcelona in Spain. And there's another guy called Gerard Talavera, who's also working with painted ladies. Even if you go into INAT and look for the Painted Lady project and join it, then every time you put a painted lady on a naturalist, it captures the data for the researchers. So there's a lot you can do.
Good. Barnabas has said a question. Thank you, Steve, for your presentation. Do you have any examples of a species of African Lepidoptera that is already documented as extinct, such as the very popular, and I'm going to butcher this name, Xerces lysernii, XERXES.
The Xerces blue in America. Yeah, that Xerces blue has got the dubious honor of being the only butterfly in America that was proven to be extincted by human means. It's a bit like the dodo. It was killed by habitat destruction. And yeah, we've got some extinct butterflies. Well, we think they're extinct. There's one called the what's it called? Its Latin name is Delanura immaculata. It's one of the lichen feeders. It was only caught once by Colonel J.H. Bowker back in the 18th century. The specimens are in the museum. You can go and look at them. And that's the only time they were ever seen. People have been going back to the Bashi River. As long as there's been Lepidopterists in Africa, we've been looking for them. Nobody's found them yet. The chances are the place at Fort Bowker where he found them is now just a ploughed field now. The chances are that it's gone. But you never know. The Delanuras are very secretive little butterflies. You don't know they're there. The adults feed on aphid honeydew. The caterpillars feed on lichen, and they don't readily fly. They don't feed on flowers, so you can't see them. So even the more common ones you don't find very easily. So that's one we think might be extinct. There's another one found in the Drakensberg, which was caught in something like 1826 by Thomas Ayres. And it was thought to be the same species as a more widespread butterfly until we started doing proper research and we realized it was a different species. And that's called Morant's blue, Lepidocrystops hyperpolia. And again, we don't know for sure it's extinct because we've been doing some research into the local history. We found that the guy who collected them may have mislabeled them because he put some of them as being found in Potchefstroom, where similar butterfly flies. But we've been going there every year now for a few years. The host plant grows there, and we haven't seen one. But it doesn't mean to say we won't see one year. And then, of course, the latest one that may have gone extinct, and again, my friend Dave Edge will kill me for saying this because he still holds out hope, and that is the famous Brenton blue, which was known for a long time from only two places, Nature's Valley and Brenton-on-Sea. And then the Nature's Valley population disappeared. And then it was down to the one population at Brenton-on-Sea that my friend Dave was doing a great job of looking after. He'd done a superb piece of research to document the entire life history, which was incredibly complicated. It involved an ant, it involved a forb, a plant, a legume, it involved candlewood trees, and it even, we think, involved elephants at one stage as well. Basically habitat modifiers. And everything was doing okay. And then Dave had got permission from Cape Nature to actually move some specimens to a nearby locality where all the other factors were present, apart from the elephants, obviously. They used backhoes. What they needed to do was every so often they had to uproot the candlewood trees to create some sunny spaces for the Indigofera, the herbs to grow. And they just got permission when the 2017 fire happened and completely wrecked everything. They saw a few butterflies the year after, which were probably ones, they were pupae in the ground, and they emerged the next spring, and of course they laid eggs on the plant. but then there were no ants to look after the caterpillars. There were no trees for the ants to live in. And the trees, of course, were almost totally destroyed. So the whole ecosystem was wiped out in one fire. And Dave's hopeful that we'll find another colony somewhere. But that was an extremely rare fame moss type, a certain type of sandy fame moss that doesn't exist in many other places. So it's going to be a little bit of a needle in a haystack hunt to find more of it. Doesn't mean to say it won't happen. I mean, there's a moth that was described from where I live, Gillips railway station, called Miller's tiger moth. For years, it was thought to be extinct. And then Herman Staudy, who wrote the book, he wasn't prepared to accept that. He went looking for it, and he found another colony in Zululand. And that one now they're working on and protecting it. And then weirdly, about a year ago, they found a colony in the Cape, not far from Nysa. In fact, I'm a bit doubtful if it's the same species. I think it might be related species. Feeds on a different cycad species. But then again, South Africa is relatively unexplored, and these strange little what they call stenoecious creatures, which mean they've got very narrow ecological requirements. Maybe we may even find new species. There's a lot of exciting things to do with our butterflies and moths.
Thanks, Steve. Right, guys, just time for 2 more questions so we can finish and choose a winner before we need to end. Mariki has asked you, where can I send moth specimens for identification? I'm currently doing my master's on moths.
Okay, you need to get in touch with the Lepidopterist Society and join the society, and then I think the best thing to do is get up probably Herman Staudy, but also your local. Ask your prof; he should know, because most of the NSOC, most of the profs are members of NSOC, and they would actually be able to send the specimens off for DNA. It's not done in South Africa; it's done in Canada at the moment. So you'd have to get hold of the people who actually organise that. I know that the president, or the ex-president Jeremy Dobson, he sends a lot of things for DNA analysis. But I think the first thing to do is ask your prof, your supervisor, to get hold of LEPSOC. Join LEPSOC yourself, and then arrange to get you can preserve the specimens quite easily. What you need to do for DNA is you preserve the adult by drying it, and when it's still fresh, you pluck 2 of the legs off and put them in a little vial full of absolute alcohol, and keep that in a dark place, and that'll preserve them until they can be done for DNA.
Thank you. And then last one here from Senamili. Hi, Steve. Thank you for a wonderful presentation. So can the chrysalis be moved or touched without harming the butterfly in case it must be moved to protect it from predators or if it's in unfavorable climate conditions? I'm assuming if you come across something, a chrysalis, can it be touched and moved, or is it best just to leave it alone?
Yeah, look, they can. I mean, a lot of people who actually collect butterflies or just grow them for interest's sake. I mean, I, for instance, have a little jar here. If you can see it, this is full of painted lady chrysalises. And then just wait till there we go. Look at that. Can't believe it. What a piece of luck. I don't know if you can see it, but there's
if you bring it forward, because you've screened your background, so if you bring it forward to us, it'll come out of the blur.
I'm just trying to get into just on my finger. Come on. There we go. There. Can you see?
Yeah.
A freshly emerged painted lady. In fact, it's still got floppy wings. And these pupae were formed on the host plant, which was drying out and rotting. So I simply got the pupa, pulled it off the host plant, and then used some press stick to all the pupae are formed on little silken pads, and the silk will stick to press stick. And then you can put them in a jar like this one, if you can see, and you can hang them from paper, and the butterfly will emerge and dry its wings. And you can do that with just about any form of butterfly. The moths that burrow underground, if you find a moth pupae when you're digging in the garden, you can simply put it in a bucket with a bit of damp earth. And then if you want to see the moth, I get one of those, either a butterfly net works well, or a big plastic cage, or those foldable laundry baskets work very well. Put that over the thing, put it a few twigs in for the moth to climb up, and then wait. But yeah, you can handle the pupae. It doesn't harm that they're waterproof, and they're pretty tough things.
Oh. Well, I think that's fantastic that we've ended with the emergence of a new painted lady. So, Steve, the hard job now is you're going to need to choose us a a question.
Yeah, I actually, the one that Barnabas asked, the first one that Barnabas asked about.
Yes, with regards to, let me get back up to the questions. Barnabas, here we go. The conversation of the butterflies as an effective umbrella strategy.
That's the one, yeah. Umbrella strategy, yeah. I thought that was really good because it sort of like spoke to what we're talking about today. So well done, Barnabas.
Thank you, Barnabas, for your question. And thank you, everybody, for your questions. That was fantastic. And thank you for taking the time to answer them all. I'm sorry we didn't get through everything. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. Steve, thanks so much for sharing your time, your passion, your knowledge. It's inspiring and fantastic. And thank you so much for joining us. We look forward to having you again. Thank you to Belinda in the background. Thanks once again to all of our guests. Look forward to seeing you in a month's time for our next talk. Thanks, everybody. Have a good day and the rest of your week. Thanks so much. Bye-bye, everybody.
Thanks, Brett. Cheers.
Bye, Steve. Thanks a lot.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Cheers.